everything.
He's a good poet. I like this
Yeah,
poetry.
he is. I would say he's esoteric.
Esoteric, but you could understand him.
Right, and he does a lot with his roots here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was gonna visit at one point if the family didn't get involved. And I thought, oh my God, that's the Joseph. So he's gonna stay at the house and stuff. And I looked up all where he lived and everything for him. And Bill Joseph called him, and that was it. He didn't come. He left Cleveland partially because he felt that his white glove upbringing was now something he couldn't. And then we went to visit him in New York, and he's still living where he lives in Greenwich Village. And I don't think we could squeeze another book on his bookshelf. Yeah, and he can tell you when his birthday is and everything else, but he really.
When did you visit him? When did you go to see him?
Well, a couple of times. We haven't been to New York maybe 5 to 10 years, but I've talked to him this year. The world goes round. My friend, who is the physical therapy person at Cleveland State, she's head of the department. She is related. Her mom is in her 90s, and her mom says, I want to talk to Richard. So she said, Mary wants to talk to Richard. So I called Richard because I'm never sure what his response is going to be. He said, I'd love to talk to you. So left it that way. But anyway, so that was just a few months ago. So we talked to him. He's in good health. Good, semi-good health. He's still teaching. He will never not be a teacher. Isn't that true of all of us?
Probably. It's like a-
Well, it is. Did you know him? Richard was Richard. I have a picture. You didn't know Thompson.
I knew of, I think I met him once, but I knew of him.
Well,
quite well.
these two poets could never be more different.
Right.
And I have a picture of the two of them in one place here when Richard Howard decided that he could come because he was being sponsored academically. So he did. And there's Daniel in the same picture. I love that picture. Daniel was the street poet.
Right. Definitely.
Let's see. We will start in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Because Ellie,
We
you're
had
nervous.
Harriet had a basket of poems for a poetry day yesterday, and you were supposed to put a poem in your pocket and take it home, and stuff like that. So Jean took one home, and we opened it up, and it must have meant something to him, the guy who wrote it. But it was, you couldn't even get images out of it. Usually you get a red ball or something, you get an image, but it meant something to him, but I don't think anybody else could understand what he was talking about. And I thought, that's why I don't like poetry. But I do like poetry, but I like it like Richard Howard or something like that, Allen Ginsberg, even Daniel Thompson. I like to be able to.
It's hard sometimes. People they come and they want critique or something. It's hard because you don't want to discourage them.
Right.
But you aren't going to be a teacher forever either. Well, Kathleen's been doing interesting things.
Yes, she has.
I just heard her the other night with the poet, the Happy Dog.
Okay.
It was a good session. What's his name? Paul from Meters from John Carroll.
Oh, okay.
And he was very good. He's Iranian, background is really important to his poetry. So, I don't know, we could start. Remember, we said we would start with 3 or 20, and they've mostly popped in as time.
We got 10.
They've been, some signed up for all 4. Today is Seder though, so I don't know about that.
That's true. Gotta pick up a box of matzahs. Where can I do that? Where Dave has matzahs? Dave's would have matzahs? Dave's, do they have matzahs?
Does Dave's,
I don't know,
Over here,
the supermarket.
supermarket.
they better, I would think
I think
they might be out of it by now.
Yeah, I know.
I have to make her roses when I go home.
Oh, good.
When, a woman is coming for Seder and bringing a friend, and it's too long a story to even go into, but she wants to know all about Judaism, and I said,
Take a course, honey.
no, I invited her to go to a Seder at a temple, but she couldn't make that, so I said, well, you'll come. I looked at our Haggadahs. The first one is 1932. It's in my mother's handwriting.
Oh, yeah.
And then we progressed to the modern ones and the ones we wrote ourselves.
Yep.
That's right. Everybody
60s.
started writing their own.
All
so
these
it's
little
shorter and
rebels
better.
write their own.
Shorter and better. So she's not going to get a lot from me.
We got about 5 after 2.
5 after 2.
4 after 2, 5 after 2. How about that?
5 after 2.
Yes.
Oh. Michael, is this on? Yeah. Okay. We're going to share mics, and I just want you to know that today's program, there are 2 very special people, very special, and their little bios are up there for the moment, and that before we start, you could not have had this course if Moreland Courts had not been willing. They've never done anything like this before, and so it is that we tried it and it worked, and so Alvin Siegel kept saying, are you sure? Are you sure? It's a residence, are you sure? And we did it. So I want to thank them, and I want to really thank Michael. He never wants thanks, but would you raise your hand? Michael's been running the machines. And everybody who has supported this in every way. When I went for material, no one said no. They went to their basements, they went to their archives, they made suggestions, and I want you to know that today you're going to see the found images of Publix that were lost by poor Bill Barrow at CSU. And so he sent them, and I think we owe it to him to show them because you'll love them. So today is about I thought of it as a bookend to the subject of bookstores. What are we all about that make it possible for us to have things to read, things to appreciate, and it's an old story. It does not start yesterday. And so you could approach it from the subject of what is paper, which is one of our subjects today. Or you could approach it as what is art on paper, what are commercial paper, what's that about? But we use paper daily in sometimes obscene ways, really, really, really. If I went down the cost of wasted paper every single day, that's not what we're talking about today. we're talking about special interest in creating interesting and valuable objects from paper. If you go back in Cleveland's history, we have had a lot of activity in printmaking, for sure. During the WPA, it was a big activity here, and partially because William Milliken from the museum was the regional chair of WPA, and so he really encouraged some of the things we've looked at, like the McVeigh on the buildings downtown, or the anything that had to do with WPA. He was behind, or he had to get behind in order for it to happen. But the printmakers were very active. They were active at Caramel. They were active in the community. They were feisty. They were socialists. They were very interesting and important. That's not what we're about today, because we're in an era where printmaking is a very natural and understood by the people who want to understand it, activity in the arts. And Tom has made it a major piece in the process that he has used to train people and to allow us to know what papers are all about, because they aren't all the same. They aren't easy to make. They come from all over the world in interesting ways and using interesting materials. And so I want to start with Tom. Tom, how did you get into this? Because you are an artist that I've seen on canvases.
Right. Yeah, I started paper making in grad school at Syracuse. I was in a print department, and they actually have a school of forestry up there. And they loaned, the print teacher knew some people there. They loaned us an area, so we had a small mill. We all made our equipment, and I learned just by cutting up a lot of stuff, fabric and things. I learned that polyester floats. I learned that it doesn't make the best paper in the world. So you learn all these things, and then you start to learn about various fibers like cotton and linen, and eastern fibers like kozo and mulberry, things like that. So I started there, and then I'm also a potter, and I was doing a lot of casting with paper. So working much more on the art end of things. I could pull sheets of paper, but I was doing much more painterly things and sculptural things with paper early on. And I actually, I grew up on the west side. I moved east during college, went to Baldwin Wallace, and then I ended up coming back to the same area in the square. So I had my first shop was on 128th and Buckeye, just south of here, where Passport Project is right now. So that was my first studio here. And I did a variety of both the casting, large flat sheets of paper that were more like watercolor paintings, that type of thing. And over the years, I just evolved, grew, learned more about it, and then I became involved in what was called the Paper and Book Intensive, which is a nationally and kind of internationally known workshop that happens once a year in various places around the country. I started going to that, and I started meeting a lot of book and paper people, and printers as well, so, and conservation people, things like that. So that all started to add to my knowledge of paper making, because I was pretty much on the art end. I was making work, selling it through lots of galleries and architects and designers and things like that over the years, and making a living. That was my studio. So as I started to meet these people in '94 and through the years, I became much more aware of a bigger, larger community, which is really now what's called the book arts, which focuses not only on hand paper making, but it focuses on artist books, traditional book binding, bookmaking, and letterpress, printing, things like that. So these are all disciplines that go under the big category of book arts. And so I've known and met lots of people, just like Ellie, that are involved in both conservation, binding, you name it. I've probably have done a workshop with some of it. I wish I was more skilled at all these things, but I basically come to all this stuff with the notion of craft and with my own bent with the notion toward art, I guess. So establishing the Morgan just kind of developed as I had more and more equipment. I'm kind of a tool person, so I constantly wanted more and more tools to work with. And I had a big studio still have a studio on 55th and Huff Avenue. And I have almost a 25,000 square foot studio space that's now there. And with that, all of a sudden I had the opportunity to possibly do something for, not my legacy, but to enhance and grow this thing that I prized, which was paper making. And that's how the Morgan got sort of started. So in '07 we started. I started working on an old building, an old federal gear building at East 47th, a big old 15,000 square foot warehouse that was all beat up. The floors were all uneven. The roof was like lakes up above. And we started to do as much sustainable stuff as we could with roof drains. And I had big visions of actually doing all the water that we used and using it for gray water and then repurposing it. We still do a lot of gray water, but mostly for gardening because everything is extremely difficult to do when it comes to that type of sustainability. So the Morgan, we opened about '08, middle of '08. I finally found some wonderful people that came to my rescue, both from the Institute of Art, Maggie Dank, and a number of other people that joined our board. And we had a great association now with the Institute of Art, and we share some of their equipment. And we get a lot of their interns, and that's one of the programs that we have now going that's quite important to me, and it's getting a whole nother generation involved in the nature of paper making, book arts, and printmaking. And at the Morgan, we have now 10 to 15 interns per year. Quite a few come from the Cleveland area, a number of which have gone to other colleges but come back in the summer. And so what you're seeing is kind of just an overall quick look of certain things that we do, and we've had some wonderful, generous donations over the years at the Morgan. And I've become quite much more of a production paper maker in the last 10 years than I ever was in my first 20-some years as an artist. So I've learned a lot about a lot of the processes. I've learned a lot about fiber, the nature of fiber, the nature of what you can do with variations of beating times and pressing times, and long fibers like kozo and mulberry that come from the east to short fibers like cotton and flax and sisal that come from more of the west, I guess, and everything in between. And I'm extremely proud of where we're at with the Morgan, and in terms of producing some really high-end quality handmade papers. And I brought quite a few of those with me today, so later on we can look at them and show you. But we have everything from abaca from the Philippines, kozo from Thailand, Japan, mulberry from Korea. We have flax from Belgium that we use, Spanish flax. We have cotton from the States. And
You have all those right here?
we have all these right here.
Do you want to show them now? Or?
Yeah, I can definitely. One of the nicest things we're working on right now is a conservation grade kozo paper, which is a very clean, pure, thin. This is made from Japanese fiber. It's not made from the fiber we grow at the Morgan, but it's a beautiful paper. We have, it might be easier to stand up. K-O-Z-O, kozo. It's a very popular fiber in the East, and it really is a native to like the mulberries that we have, the paper mulberries. It's a bast fiber. Yeah, you use it for printmaking, you can use it, woodcuts, it's used quite often for, especially Japanese woodcuts and things like that, or the traditional Japanese.
When did you get into growing it right there?
From the beginning. Tim Barrett, who's on our board as MacArthur Fellow, who's at the Center for the Book in Iowa, was instrumental in giving us cuttings from his stock. He did a lot of research in Japan and was able to get 2 different varieties of the Japanese kozo. So we grow Japanese kozo in the heart of Cleveland, right behind the incandescent plant at GE. And some of you have probably been down there and seen it, but welcome to come down. So I've learned a lot about that as well. I've been a gardener all my life, but to actually see that I'm growing a fiber, then producing it, to form it. And when we make the kozo, our product is a deciduous part of kozo, because there is Thai kozo which grows year-round, and like in Alabama and Florida, it's almost like a weed sometimes. Some people planted it, and now it's overgrown. But here, it's a once-a-year crop that we harvest in the fall, and we have a traditional harvest where we cut the saplings down, steam it, strip it, clean it with just scraping, then cook it, then hand beat it, and then make paper. So it's highly labor intensive, and it's becoming somewhat of a lost art even in the East, in Japan and Korea, just because of the labor intensity of making Eastern paper. I also brought with me what I think is a beautiful paper that we make, which is a Belgian flax paper, which is a nice, this is a very strong beaten fiber. Flax is a real stiff and strong fiber, so that's one of them. Then we have, I brought a variety of papers I've just been making, which are from abaca, which is a Philippine fiber. So you're welcome to take a look at these later, but these are colored papers as well as, this is a bleached abaca, so it's a very creamy kind of, and it has a very similar kind of sensibility to it. Depending on how you beat fiber, depends on the nature of how it sounds, how the paper feels, the thickness. So these are various colors of that abaca fiber.
Are those too fragile to pass around?
No, not really. There's nothing that precious that's passing around. Just get maybe a different feel to those. And then we also have, this is a cherry paper, which is more of a decorative paper that comes from the Morgan Conservatory. So this is a lot of the outer bark that's intermixed in the regular bark with that.
And that's cherry?
Cherry. It's the Japanese term for the outer bark, I guess, is cherry.
C-H?
C-H-I-R-I, cherry.
And that's from where?
Well, this is from the Morgan. This is some of the paper that we have. We also have our Japanese paper has a kind of a greenish tone to it. These are some of papers that we either tinted or dyed that are from our garden. Those are grown at the Morgan.
What makes them blue?
It's a pigment, a blue pigment, and the little green has a green pigment. Those are not dyed. As opposed to indigo dye, which we use as well, as opposed to the natural color of it.
So you put the dye in.
Yeah, you usually put the dye in afterward, after you've beaten the fiber.
This looks like when you use blue jeans.
No, it's actually,
I
but we do make paper from denim as well.
Right.
These are some of the projects that I'm most proud of, and they're just samples of 4 years of the interns. The interns have made the paper. They've either marbled or cyanotyped, or they've woodblocked and then letterpressed on the paper. So they've used a variety of techniques as well as make the actual paper. So
How long are they with you?
that's not a watermark. It's actually a letterpress. But that's a marbled paper. Then there's The next one is a cyanotype that you have there with the leaf forms.
Oh, so pretty.
And then this is a shibori technique of dyeing, so those are dyes on the paper with a wood block.
How long are the interns with you?
The interns are generally with us for 2.5 months during the summer, and periodically they'll be there for anywhere from a day to 5 days a week, so.
Where did the name come from?
The name actually has a connection actually to this building. Charles Morgan, who lived here for 10 years or so, I met Mr. Morgan back in the mid-90s, and we were friends. And I live across the street here at Shaker Courts, so he had moved into here, and as friends, he slowly, I became his caregiver down the road over the course of time, and he left us a small endowment for the start of the conservatory, so, and he used to have quite a connection to collecting prints as well. He collected prints all his life. So that's where the name came from, so.
Not to be confused with another,
Morgan, yes. There's Morgan Litho in town, and then there's also the Morgan Library, which is a very famous library in New York. And I actually have some good friends that are conservators that are there, so, that have actually been to the Morgan and involved with what we do. Yeah.
Where did Charles Morgan tie into the building? Was his building there one time, or?
What's his what?
Charles, he lived.
No, he lived, it's just saying that he lived at Moreland Court, so it's
How
just,
did the Morgan Conservatory, I mean, you just gave it the name of this guy, but.
yeah, we just named it, I named the conservatory. When I started doing the nonprofit, I named it after Mr. Morgan, and that's how it started, so.
But was he connected with Morgan Litho?
No, not at all. No connection at all. He worked,
You said he was a collector, and I
Yeah.
just wondered whether.
And the horse, neither.
so that's somewhat what we're doing at the Morgan, and you can see we have quite a nice facility as far as space and things. We have one of the nicest areas, one of the largest in the country, where you can have a community kind of space where artists and residents can come in and work on projects. And we're looking to do a lot more of that as we get going. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is we had somebody from the Cleveland Foundation come. We were talking to them about a program that's called the Fusion Program, and the lady that's now in charge of it was extremely impressed with how far along we've gotten in less than 10 years at the Morgan. So it was quite a nice thing to have in our kind of pocket. So those are probably one of the only papers I didn't pass around was one that I'm very used to making, which is cotton. And that'll give you a whole different feel as, and various weights and the nature of papers. So yeah, like the interns, I'm very happy that, we're able to teach them a lot of techniques, marbling techniques, some basic structures in book binding and book making and paper making. They learn Eastern as well as Western traditional paper making. And then we do artsy things like that, which is a decal box, which is pulling large sheets. And then this is Julie McLaughlin comes in, and we've done what's called big ass paper making, which is big kozo sheets that are done outside in our garden area. So I hope that's,
it's very important,
so.
and it's important for Cleveland. Questions?
Oh, yeah, so
Yeah.
when CIA
Yeah.
sends you interns, then do you grade the interns on the quality of their work when they're at the Morgan?
No, we don't do any grading. We actually, we do give them just a certificate that says they've worked with us and that type of thing.
How long is that internship?
It's generally from end of May through just before August, so maybe like 2 months. Some people extend it depending on if they're out of school and starting with us.
So the summer months?
Yeah, summer months. But we have kids from Kent, we have kids from Oberlin, we have Colorado College and Maryland. So they're coming from all over. And
How do they find you?
we've advertised through trying to talk to the schools. We'll let people know at the Institute or CASE or anywhere else that just apply for our intern program. And then we also have interns that have come in that are from, maybe they're not involved with schools, but they come in or want to work in our studio, our Eastern studio. We've had some interns that have worked for months and months in this Eastern studio. And
When you say Eastern Studio,
yeah, so what we've started a couple years ago, we got a nice foundation from the Cuyahoga County Arts Commission to really get going. And what we have now is established is a what's called a Hanji or Korean type style of paper making, as well as being able to do Japanese type. We have done some Nepalese type paper making. So a lot of different forms of paper making, which is different from our Western traditional paper making. So you can pass this around. This is just a brochure of our Eastern studio. And Amy Lee, who some of you may have met, she's had a show. Her work was at the Shaker,
historical?
no, not the historical, but the Nature Center. She had quite a wonderful show there. She's had a Fulbright to study in Korea. She's finished that, and she's also gone back a few times to Japan and Korea. And she's an asset to us. She's kind of our artist in residence right now, and a big part of getting the name of the Morgan out there, and the availability of being able to have a studio that's devoted to both Eastern paper making as well as Western paper. So that's some pictures of the harvest. Sometimes we have better times, like when it's not snowing and it's a decent fall day, and other times it's like you've just got to get out there and do it. But that's a scraping technique for the cleaning the kozo, which is very labor intensive, but if anybody has any, you're all welcome to come in mid-November and join us. We've had lots of, even conservators from the Art Museum have come and gotten involved with us, so we're real happy about where we've kind of headed, and I'm happy about it. I don't know, it's grown organically as something that I just, not on a whim, but just kind of thought, oh, I'd like to get something going, and people like Ellie and lots of other people have come and done a lot of hard work to help out with keeping the Morgan alive and going, and I hope you will as well.
I just wanted to thank you for such a rich resource. I'm signed up for one of your summer workshops.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's where the schools aren't going. It's like the schools are getting rid of a lot of departments in printmaking, and especially, the craft and arts and things. So we're kind of a center that are opening up across the parts of Cleveland that address that thing, for people, especially kids getting out of school and not having studio space or things to work out of or with.
Talk about your presses.
Okay, well, let me answer.
I'm sorry.
How, your space, and how many square feet was it when you moved in?
The Morgan, roughly 15,000 square feet.
So have you outgrown it yet?
Yeah, they've yelled at me I'm a collector, so I actually have another building where I'm housing lots of other stuff, equipment and things like that, and trying to set up a sculpture studio in the heart of 93rd and Harvard, which is another area of town.
So did you say 1,500 or 15,000?
15,000 I meant, yeah.
So do you have room around there somewhere where you're able to expand?
Well, we're expanding our garden, which we have just finally gotten a permit to put our fence up for 2 more lots on our garden, so we're expanding the garden. We're going to really open that up and make it even a bigger showpiece. And there are lots of properties, and that was one of the things the Cleveland Foundation lady was very impressed with, was how we're able to establish something in the Midtown area and actually take hold of a neighborhood and do something with it at the same time. And so there are some homes that are next to us on one side that maybe eventually will come down and we'll be able to expand. For me, it's always a question of needing more space. And you're also, at any point in time when you come to the Morgan, I can, if I know ahead of time, I can give you a tour of my studio, which will probably ultimately end up as part of the Morgan as well. We use it as what's called the Morgan Hotel right now. I put people up, all the workshop people that come in and artists and residents and stuff, I usually put them up there, and my studio's a block away on Huff.
That's what I was gonna ask, with all these people, once you have the word out, if they wanna do residence, if you have places for them to reside.
Yeah, And that's what I'd like to ultimately get, is a separate facility, like Zygote Press has done that with a place where they're above their studios on 30th, East 30th. They have a program, and we're able to get something going so that they can house people as well, which is,
Can you mention the relationship with Zygote? Because there's another startup.
yeah. Yeah, we actually, I've been part of Zygote before I was part of the Morgan, so I was just a member of Zygote, and I have a kind of a sister in Liz Morgans, who is one of the founding dynamos of Zygote Press, which is a community press, and now they're actually a publishing press that opened a new studio up in Waterloo District, which is going fantastic as well, which is another wonderful thing going on in Cleveland, the Waterloo District, if you haven't been over there.
So how does it differ?
Well, Zygote differs. They have, well, they're basically involved with much more printmaking. So, you know, you have silk screen, they do letterpress, litho, and also etching and combinations of those things. And there is a space dedicated to having people come in to work that way with press, which we've worked with them on a lot of various things. Yes.
So you're 47th Street, did you say? He's 47th,
yeah.
and they're East 30th, so you're really not so far apart.
No, we're very close, and we've done lots of projects together. And
She may pop in, I asked her to
Yeah.
come.
so this is a great dynamo, and then you have what just opened in the last year, a place called Praxis in Waterloo, which got a lot of the looms from Cleveland Institute of Art, because their fiber department is no longer.
How do you spell it?
Praxis, Praxis, I think, Praxis.
And they're where?
They're on Waterloo Road. I don't know the address, but, so there's a lot going on with these community places like the Morgan, which, you know, are basically keeping areas going for not only the craft and the art of it, but keeping communities kind of established and keeping people here. You know, we talk about, you know, kids leaving, people leaving because there's not stuff available in Cleveland, and it's changing. And, you know, I grew up with that negative attitude in Cleveland for years and years, and it's just in the last few that it's wonderful that something's happening and people are positive about it, you know. And you see it in the arts. I mean, you see it all over Midtown and west and east of there.
Tom, the presses.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask if there's any connection with Cleveland School of the Arts. You mentioned about the
Yeah,
institute.
I've done some work with them, and we'll be doing more with them as we get going. But we have also a lot of presses, one of which was donated, it was on loan from the Rofon Club. We have a letterpress there. We have a variety of Chandler and Price, which is an actual Cleveland company. There's a C&P, or an old platen press, in almost every high school years ago in the country. So there's tons of those. We have those on display, and we use them. We have what's called a Washington press, which is from 1823, I believe, and we actually can use that. So it's an old crank, like Ben Franklin type press, which a volunteer and friend of ours from Duke Printing, who's been a letterpress guy all his life and has volunteered quite a few hours down at the Morgan, brought that in. So, and we have a huge woodblock collection for type, and as well as press. We have all kinds of tools for gilding leather and things like that. So,
I got the address for Praxis Fiber Workshop if you wanted it.
okay,
It's 15301 Waterloo.
did you get that?
Oh, I'm sorry, what is it again?
15301 Waterloo.
15301?
Yeah,
Waterloo Road.
Thank you.
Praxis Fiber.
Thank you.
yeah, it's
Practice fibers?
Praxis, yeah. fiber, yeah.
Praxis, okay.
Some of the things that you've been showing
Yeah.
look like they're, can be framed and on walls.
Mhm.
Do they have to have glass over them to protect them?
Not necessarily. It depends on, how you know, obviously if you have children, or if you have, what you need to do with paper is either keep it vacuumed occasionally, and that's about it, or keep it dusted, that type of thing. But obviously oil and things like that from touching, if people are constantly touching, and some papers are sized, but you'll always get some, if it's touched. But, it's not as fragile as you think, but, it's been a constant issue even in my frame, because a lot of times with lucite covered boxes on my dimensional work, and it somewhat distracts from the piece a little bit. It's always like, but it formalizes it, but also is like, it's so wonderful to be able to touch it or feel it, or, so you have that dichotomy. It's like a reflection. Like, I would much rather have a reflection in glass on a picture than I would like a non-glare glass, and then have the tone of the image kind of reduced from that, so there's always these give and takes as to our archival longevity and things like that, which is going to probably lead us into
It does.
right
It's
into
right to LA.
LA. So
So we'll come back to Tom if you have other questions. But LA Strong, you have to know that I have about 3 things in our home that I've commissioned Ellie to do. They are archival boxes, and talk of new generations, our children marveled the tops of their boxes. But Ellie has been about book preservation, and that's really where it is also, because if she weren't around, there'd be a lot of books that hadn't survived. What are we're passing out something?
Sure, but I'll do it in a minute.
Okay, so Ellie Strong is archival herself.
Okay. Let's see if we can get this thing a little lower. Is it gonna tip back? Maybe. We'll try. Oh, it's tipping.
It has a line of its own.
yeah.
It does. Hello. How are you today? When I owned a bookstore in Coventry called Coventry Books, books would come in and I would take a look at them and I'd go, oh, what a great book, the Iliad or something like that. Too bad the spine is broken. So I immediately started doing all the wrong things, which include putting glue down the spine and just holding it together. But I knew in the back of my mind that was, that's not going to do very good for the book. So I got some instruction from a gentleman who worked at a Cleveland printer in Cleveland, a Cleveland bindery. He also worked at World Publishing, and he was the hand binder at World Publishing. And so I took some instructions from him and did that for a couple of years. And then I heard about a woman in Pittsburgh named Jean Gunner. And she was a fine designed binder. And there was several of us. There was a couple from Cleveland, Karen Esper, myself, Dick Ashbrook from Berea, 2 people from Akron, Andrea Klein and her dad, Frank Klein, Tina Rosder, Karen Esper, and I guess that was our group. So we would all drive down to Streetsboro. We'd meet in Streetsboro. We'd get in a van, we'd drive over. We'd take this class with Jean Gunner. One of the most best days of my life was when I learned how to cut a straight line with a board shears. Because up to that time, all my lines were not straight. But I figured out how to do it. That was a euphoria moment. So we would take the class, then we'd come back, and then we would talk all the way over and all the way back. So instead of having a 3-hour class, we had a 9-hour class. So we had to go back over. And by the time we got home, it was dark. After the bookstore went out of business, I decided that I would give bookbinding a try, see if it worked. If it didn't, then I would get a more traditional job. And that was 31 years ago. So I've been doing bookbinding at Strong Bindery. I was in Murray Hill for about 20 years. And then I moved over to Larchmere about 11 years ago. And in the middle of that, I did a stint at Case Western Reserve working in the library at Kelvin Smith Library as a book conservator. So that's sort of my background. But what I do is pretty much what comes in the door. I work with paper, I work with cloth, I work with leather, I work with books. We also work with prints, if they're torn or ripped or that sort of thing. And then I work whatever the client brings in usually. But today I thought what I would do is piggyback off of what Tom does, which is make the paper, and show you a little bit about what we do in conservation work, in repairing it. I did bring some things to show you, but mostly you've seen them already. Lots of the ones that Tom does are ones that we get. So maybe what I'll do is just pass this around. The thing about paper is you really have to feel it. I mean, you could see it, you could look at it, but you always got to go up, and it has to be a tactile thing. You have to figure out what it feels like in order to figure out if you need it or if you want it or if you can use it, etc. So why don't I start by passing these around? Okay.
So do you get your papers from Morgan?
I do. I get lots of papers from Morgan, especially this new Kozo thing that he's doing, which is just the cat's pajamas for us. There's also the colored ones. There was a company that made Moriki. What is Moriki? Do you know?
I believe it's a Kozo.
Okay, it's probably a
It might
Kozo.
be, it could be Mitsumata.
Okay, but anyhow, it's colored.
It could be Kozo, or it could be Mitsumata or Gabi, but I think it's Mitsumata or Kozo. Which is just another bass fiber type of fiber.
Yeah. The nice part about the colored ones is that you get to match the color up with whatever you're repairing. And I'll show you in a few minutes some ideas of those. What I've put up here first is an example of what I come across a lot. And that is this wonderful old book. A guy's signature, unfortunately, has gone. And what we have to do is repair that. I don't have the after on that. I do have some other things that have a before and after. But this is a typical thing where you see there's little tiny holes, there's a big part missing, there's a ragged edge, and when we bind them, the books always have to be together. They have to have a binding edge and a top and a bottom, and they need to be coordinated. These are some that I did a before and after. You can see where there's a big gouge up at the top, and then we filled in with probably a sakishu, etc., something like that. So we spend a lot of time working on making sure that the paper is in good shape first before we do anything else, because everything depends on the paper. Start with the paper, then you go with a cover, and then anything else after that.
So, I have a question. The paper that's damaged,
Yes,
you match up the texture with the paper you use to conserve it with?
right. So that's what we do with those papers that I'm passing by. On this one, on the ones on the after, you'll see there's the little, where the V's are, we've already filled in those. And we try to match them with, these you can see better where the filling in on the edges and the top and the corners. We do try to match it up. If it doesn't match completely, then we re-dye them and put them together like that. This is one where you can really see where we had to do a lot of filling in, um, like that. There's 2 or 3 different ways of doing that. Sometimes you cut it and you cut it right along the edge where it's ragged and you fit it in. This way is one where we actually take the pulp. So Tom has taken a lot of time to take the fibers and then make them into a sheet of paper. What we do for filling in like that is we rip the fibers up again. We put them in a mixer and add a little methyl cellulose, and then we mix it up and we fill it in those holes there. And then we squeeze it really, really tight, get all the paper, all the water out of it again, and then put it in a press and let it sit like that.
Now, you can't get the printing back, can you?
Correct. We cannot get the printing back. One of the things that we're having good luck with, though, is if I had another copy of this book, I could go and make a image of the book, scan it, and fill in the parts that are missing. I just did I put that one up? I did one on a first edition Babar in French. And so we filled in, because we had an American version, so we could actually fill it in, but it looks the same. You know, you turn it over and you see it's not the same, but on the outside it looks the same. That's one where down in the corner here is the repair, and you can't see it, and that's of course our goal, is to make it so it's like that. Another thing that we do with the paper is that we put them on the spine. And this book has been resewn, and after the sewing, we put a piece of the kozo on the spine to consolidate everything. So that's another aspect of using it. This is a poster that we got in, and it was unusual in that usually when you get pieces that are torn, they just tear right across. But this had a section missing. But at first when we got it in, we tried to fit the top to the bottom, and his head wouldn't fit. And the guy's legs were over the other side. So my partner, Gene Epstein, who works at the bindery, figured out that there was that much missing out of it. So what we did is we put a piece of paper behind it, matched up the paper as close to the original as possible. And here you can see where she started filling in the orange, and some of the yellow is filled in. And then eventually it all got filled in so that, and you know, made up the legs and the shoes by the fact that she's an artist and she knows where her legs and shoes should go, like that. So we do some work like that. There were some other paper repairs on that, etc., but that was the basics of it. This was an interesting thing that we do. We get in boxes. This is it's not a pop-up box. It's actually a music box. And the first about 10% of the box is the story itself. So you open the page and it says Baba Black Sheep, and then it points to one of those little things there. You pull the string and it goes ba. And this is what's underneath it. These are little bellows. And why do I have this in a paper restoration thing? Well, those bellows are made of paper. And so what we had to do, this is after we completed it, we had to fill in the rips and the tears in the bellows. And we tried to fill it in with the red and the blue with the blue and that sort of stuff.
That's fun.
What would the age of something like that be?
Well, at least 100 years, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't know, let's take a look and see what this says. That's pretty old, don't you think? I would say 150 maybe, 150 years old. Yeah. But this is very unique, and I've only seen one or two of these and all, but it
So
was fun.
they all come from Cleveland?
The dealer who brought it in is a Cleveland dealer, yeah.
Was that handmade, that book?
This book, yes, it has to be. It has to be craft made. Because somebody had to figure out, first of all, you had to figure out what kind of bellows you need to make a sound like a horse or, you know, a little goat or whatever they were talking about, a little sheep, etc. And then you had to figure out how to get the strings connected so if you pulled it just right, it would make that sound. We had several of those strings that we had to replace or put, at least attach it on the right place. And we didn't know where. We just had to experiment. If you pull here, is this going to make the cow sound? Or if you pull somewhere else.
So did it all work then after you got it done?
Yes, right, yeah, yeah.
How long did it take to repair this?
Well, I think the looking at it and thinking part took an awful lot of time. Figuring it out, I would say about a month. Part of it was that you have to do something, let it dry, and then see if it works again. If it doesn't work, then you got to go back and figure, well, maybe there's something on the bottom or the back or something else. And if you hold this part, well, you know, that sort of the things. It was a lot of trial and error because we've never worked on anything like this before. We work on quite a few pop-ups, but not something like that, yeah. So one other thing that we've done
I'll pay for it.
this is one of those things where you do it once in your life, and I hope to heaven's sakes we don't ever have to do it again. This was in Meadville, Pennsylvania, and it was a historical building, their historical society, and they decided that they wanted to restore the paper in the dining room. And they happened to have pieces of the original up in the attic. So we came in, we looked at it, and the only thing we knew is that we knew how to repair paper. We weren't so smart on wallpaper and keeping it up there, but hey, that's what internet and books are for, right? So what we did was with the restoration paper is you can see parts where it's curling up, and parts of there were like holes in it where somebody hammered something through it, and also a lot of that sort of thing. So we'd have to go in and make a little mulch and put it in, and then come back and color it. But the hardest part, well, there's two hardest parts. Jean's working on this one big patch over the fireplace, which we had just enough of the paper to fill in. I think we just had a couple scraps afterwards. It was one of those, phew, we could get it done. So she's up on the ladder, gluing out the piece, and we'll put it in where it's missing. But what we had to do was to clean off what was underneath, put up another piece of Sakishu paper, and then let that dry, and then attach the wallpaper on that.
Mhm.
Um,
So those are all new rolls then, I mean, not new rolls, but there was no existing stuff glued on at the time.
There were parts that were burnt and too dirty and also brittle, and so that was just cracking down. So we pulled off the stuff that wasn't working well, and then we put it back up. Perhaps the hardest part of the whole thing was, if you see there's a little bit of difference between the top of the mantle
Mhm.
about Jean's hip and up by her head, it's darker up there. So the question was how to clean it. And we went through everything that we had in our knowledge of how to clean paper, and nothing was working. It would either run. The paper was originally from Belgium in 1915, and the family that owned the house, made the house, went over to Belgium. They fell in love with this paper. They had it made specifically for their house. They brought it back and they put it up, and they put the rest up in the attic, and it stayed there for 100 years. And then, so it was real paper with real dyes on it, unlike what we have now, which is a colored plastic paper that you put up. So we had to use something that was not water soluble. And we tried some of the wallpaper cleaner things, and that was dicey also. So what we ended up doing was getting kneaded erasers. Straight, like that. We went over every square inch of that room, and this is one of 4 sides, right? Where we just had to go over and clean everything by hand.
So then the darker part lightened up as a result of what
It
you were
lightened up,
doing with
yeah.
that? But then,
Yeah. Yeah. At the end, the board of the Historical Society came in and went, "Oh, yes, this looks much better."
Can we change? Put the paper on.
So, yeah.
I hope you got paid a lot.
Well, it did make our month that month. We did. Yeah, it was good.
Now, the big blank, that white space, then that all, did it all come down, or you were trying to think something? What's
Well,
next to the part where she?
That was the part that was burned. Since this was a fireplace, the heat would come up, and then, of course, on the top especially, because heat rises. That was not something, I mean, we did try to push it back into place, but it wouldn't, every time we did it, it was brittle. It would fall back on itself. So we took it down, we threw it away. It was not worth saving. But we could replace it with the 100-year-old scraps in the attic. Yeah. But, again, I hope never to have to do that in my life, but.
Don't you think that takes place in all the restorations that we are confronting these days?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't get asked to do.
I'd much rather repair books. Yes.
Do you have a picture of the finished product?
I do, but not here. I just thought I would show you
The beginning?
an action picture. But that's pretty much, I think that was the last one we had. Yeah, that goes back to that. What I would like to do is pass around a couple things that you might be interested in. You all know brittle paper. So this is a piece, a nice letter, it's brittle. And this is the sort of thing that we cannot do anything with. There are ways of taking the brittleness out of it. And there is, I shouldn't say there's not anything we can do with it. One is we can take that really, really thin stuff that we had, the kozo that was just very, very thin. We can make a sandwich. We put one on the bottom, we put the brittle piece of paper, and then we put another one on top. What that does is hold together what's there, and it's in 2 pieces of acid-free paper so that it'll live longer. We don't know how much longer. Eventually, it'll probably break down, but at least it'll go that way.
So as far as conserving paper like that, I guess a lot of it's where people store it. Like if they store it between cardboard, it's gonna pick up acid, right?
Well, that's true too, but really basically it depends on what it was made out of. If you make it out of the good things like the abaca, cotton, linen, it has a much better life than if you make it out of tree pulp, which they invented in the late 1800s. Well, maybe they knew about it before, but it came into really big use late 1800s, and then they used it for almost everything, all the way up into the 1960s. Yes?
When you repair a book like that, you had one shop where the printing was off because there were holes. What do you do about replacing the printing on the page?
Well, we don't do that unless the client decides they need it done. And oftentimes what we'll do is, especially if it's just a little line that's missing, we'll take a very thin pen and ink and make it carry the line across. So that's one way. The other way was, like I was telling you before, if we have another copy of Babar, we will go and scan it, get the colors right, and match it up so that when you look at it, it looks like it's complete and whole. You turn it over and you can see the difference on the back that it's not. One is a new paper, one's not.
So the tree pulp, is that what they did newspapers with?
Yes,
From that
exactly.
point on?
Yeah,
And
and
that's
the,
what I wanted to ask. Go
And
ahead.
they,
Okay.
and they still do? tree
yes,
pulp?
right.
That's why they turn yellow?
That's why they turn yellow, and the reason they turn yellow is, once it leaves the tree has acids in it. You know a heck of a lot more about chemistry of paper than I do, but basically, the acids start eating away at the chopped up pulp. Now, what you can do with that is you can wash it again, and you can wash it 200 times. So newspapers, at least especially newspapers from earlier times, they would wash it 4 or 5 times. It was good enough to print on, get it out, and by 2 days after you get your newspaper, it's starting to turn colors and get brittle and disintegrate. You can take that same batch and wash it lots and lots and lots of times, and you can literally get almost all of the acid out. You could probably get all the acid out. You could add chemicals to the batch that would help reduce the acid and bring it up more to a basic side. So those papers will last a long time. About the 1970s, people were beginning to realize something that bookbinders were preaching, and that is, your paper is falling, you need to get good paper. And I remember Mary Ashbrook, who was councilwoman in Berea, was the very first person who passed in any city to have all their official business put on acid-free paper. And then, it sunk in, if you want to have your important words stand the test of time, then by gummy, you better get it on acid-free paper.
So are people bringing you newspapers then from like 40, 50 years ago? And
Right.
can you do something then with
I just got in a Kennedy, first, you know, the New York, the Cleveland press, the Cleveland press.
With that
Yes,
headline,
yeah,
that's it,
yeah.
okay.
Right,
And it's already yellow and
Mhm.
drilled, yeah.
right, yeah.
Because I got some things from the forties. You have to be careful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to do is to show you a couple things that have been repaired. Again, it's much nicer to feel them. On this one here, you can see where the paper itself folded over and like that. So I did not repair this section, but this section here has a repair on it. Oops, there's a repair that's breaking there. I have to repair the repair, but I'll pass that around. And then also, this is another one that's an old one that you can see, especially if you hold it up to the light. You'll see this has been repaired here, here, like that. I don't know, there's something over there that's repaired too. Sometimes I can't even see the repairs myself. Okay.
Ellie, do you work really vigorously with libraries?
Sure,
Yeah,
yep,
I mean-
libraries don't have the budgets that they used to have for this sort of thing. That Kelvin Smith Library has a bindery is due to the fact of one of the head of the librarians thought it was important, and so kept it there. It's really easy to, when you're looking at the bottom line thinking, we'll just cut this little off here, and there you go. I know that the University of Michigan dropped their conservation program, and then 10 years later, they brought it back. So it is an important thing for books. One of the things that Charlene Gupkin at Kelvin Smith Library found was that digitalization is a good way of preserving knowledge in books. And they're still doing a whole series of that in where you put it up on the internet. Well, that's fine, and what happens was that hundreds, if not thousands of people get to look at it. And of those people, there's a certain number that want to come in and see the real thing. So not only did you digitize something, and you often digitize the most precious ones, but we had to go back and restore them so that individuals could come in and actually see the original. Because there's nothing like feeling paper. There's nothing like it. You gotta feel it. It's a tactile thing. Like that.
How old are these that we're passing around? Is this over 100?
Yeah, I think those are somewhere between the 1860s, 1890s. They had actually better paper in the Civil War than they do now, because they did cotton. Yeah.
Do you find sometimes that you're given books that have like art in them that you?
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
So then, I mean.
So I should tell you my story about the $15 million Moreau. Huge piece. I think the piece was as big as this whole window, top to bottom, and as wide. And Michael Wolf's studio, they had it. Somebody brought it to them because it fell off the wall. It was too heavy, and it crashed down, and pieces of the glass went in and just went in like this and made little cuts. And I had no problem with repairing the paper. I sweated like bullets, trying to figure out how I was going to match Moreau's absolute blue so that you couldn't see it at all. That was before I had a professional artist working with me. But I finally got the right thing, combination and all. But the paper, no problem. I could
How
do
did
it.
you work on it? Was that big? Do you have like a huge table or what?
Yes, yeah, you have to have big tables, right, yeah. You're welcome to come over to Coventry Books, yeah. Strong bindery, let me pass you out some cards here. Pick a card, any card. And see the bindery, yeah, it's over on Loganberry Books, yeah. But yeah, in that case, this was when I was at Murray Hill, and I had a big, long table, and I had, maybe the table was this big, but still the thing was bigger. So I had to do it this way and work on it right here. And as I said, the paper repairs were easy and simple.
Is there a favorite assignment that you've had?
A favorite assignment. Let me ask you your question first while I think about that one.
I wanted to know the Moreau that you did, is that the same sort of thing that the Cleveland Museum of Art does in their conservatory
Yeah.
area?
Mhm.
So do you work with them ever, hand in hand?
Actually, I was working with them in the gap in between. Remember, they closed down a lot of their other galleries and
As they
stuff.
remodeled?
And when they remodeled, and now they've reopened. And one of the things that they did, thank goodness, was to have rebuild their conservation studio, and have a lot of good paper and book conservation. But in that gap in between, I did some of the Kelmscott, Chaucer things. Yeah, right.
So that was exciting, I would think, working under the roof of the CMA.
Actually, they brought them over to my place.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Because they were torn down for remodel, got it.
Yeah, and they didn't have any facilities to do it, so, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, the Kelmscott, that was one of my favorite. Okay, fine. I think the one that I've had the most fun with is, you know those old Bibles? They're big like this, and they're leather, and they have carving in it, and everything like that. This very proper man comes in the bindery, and he says, well, can you repair this? And I said, yes, I can. The spine was off, some papers needed to be repaired, but it was pretty typical, normal wear and tear. It was well worn, especially at one part where they had the family records. And he was sort of a dapper little man, and he said, well, it has a story to it. Right? Going, oh, okay, fine. And he said, this Bible belonged to the family of Howard Hughes. And it turned out that Howard Hughes died without a will, or somebody destroyed the will. And so everybody in the United States who could make a claim, my name's Hughes, came out of the woodwork. I think there was 15,000 or something like that. People were saying, I want a piece of his billions, because, you know, Howard Hughes was a billionaire, and in a time when that really meant something. So this was, so the way that the judge figured out who was going to get all that money was, if you could prove that you were related to someone in that Bible. Now, the Bible itself was the family of Hughes Manufacturing here in Cleveland. They were a big manufacturing company in the early 1900s. And Adela Prentice Hughes, she was Howard Hughes's aunt. So if you could prove, and in this Bible, you know, they had that all written down. And if you could prove that you were part of this Hughes family, then those were the people who got the money. So the lawyer is telling me the story. Oh, this is exciting. And then at the end, he he said, well, before I was writing out the bill of how much it would cost, he said, and be sure you charge yourself enough. I've never heard a lawyer say that before. But I did take a little piece of the Howard Hughes's to finish the Bible.
That's a fun story.
And
That's a very fun story. Well, these are all treasure stories. They really are. And also to see the process that you both use and the people you involve and the meaning of that is really the soul of Cleveland. There is no better way to say it. So that's what this project has all been about. I want to end by doing two things. I want to show you Public's bookmark. Oh, good.
oh, I'm gonna go stand over there.
Yeah, right. See, these were part of the first scoop.
Oh.
They got lost. He got paid a quarter to get up there.
There's Ann and Bob right down in front.
Yeah.
Let's see who else is in there. Oh, wait a minute, can I look?
Where was it? The address,
Prospect,
Prospect.
Huron Road.
This guy in the back is Brett Anderson. He was Ann and Bob's best boy type thing.
Best Buy.
Yeah, he was the person who knew the second most about whatever was in there. 'Cause
Missy
and
Burns'
then
brother.
Oh, really?
he and I and another person started Coventry Bill.
Those aisles weren't very big, were they? The aisles weren't very big.
Yep.
And the second thing I want to do is to go back to something that has been part of this project since the beginning. That may be the man that told me that he was paid a quarter to go up there. To go up that high.
Might have been trying to put the books on the shelf.
The better books don't go up that high, do they?
Well, there's the better, the really good books, yes, some of those did,
That-
because you wanted to keep them out of the hands.
Right,
But the stuff you want to sell quickly,
yeah.
the truth behind it.
And where were these, where were they found?
First of all, I've been to every library, but these were CSU, Michael Schwartz, Special Collections, Bill Barrow. He had this file and found it and then lost it and then
Well,
sent it to me when he found it again. And it's a very good resource. I want to just say that that is a good resource. And of course, through this series, I've used every library, but the best have been CSU's archival library, Case Western Reserve's archival library. Then when I went over to the city directory and used the Western Reserve Historical Society library, that was another resource. And Shaker Library, I used Shaker Heights Historical Society, you name it. And everybody really, really wants their material used, and they're very, very helpful. I have never known more helpful people than those that work in libraries. I think you'll agree, they're really service people.
oh, yeah.
So I want to go back to one thing that some of you did and some of you didn't do, and maybe you want to do. Here are some survey blanks. I'm still collecting surveys. The next subject that the Soul of Cleveland will address is greening Cleveland. Now, it's about genuine farmers, the farmers market, the people who do community gardening. It's about all of that, and I want to bring to your attention a book that was written by David Young at Oberlin about the seasons and recipes. It's a beautiful book, and that's going to happen in the fall. But the Soul of Cleveland goes on. I'm writing a book, and hopefully we get that done. But one of the things I asked Michael to do was to show you one of the more unusual answers to the surveys. This is Bill Bruner from here, who gave one of the presentations because he's lived here all his life. And can somebody read those off there?
Yeah, because
Go ahead and read them. Somebody read
What
it.
is your favorite street? Weybridge, lived there for 25 years. What is your favorite street corner? Why? Shaker Square, many, I can't read the next word, memories over 60 plus years. What is your favorite neighborhood? Tremont, Gordon Square, Collinwood, examples. Shaker Square, grew up there. Same answer. Where is the best place to have a conversation? Brewers at Shaker Square. What is your favorite festival? Garlic Festival, Shaker Square.
Kind of one-sided.
What is your favorite festival, blank? What is your favorite outdoor concert venue, Blossom? What is your favorite building in Northeast Ohio?
Moreland Courts.
Moreland
Yeah.
Courts. And family since 1937, wow. What is your favorite restaurant? Fire and Sasa? Sasa. What is your favorite place to go for a walk? Shaker Lakes. When someone from out of town visits, where do you take them if they want to experience the real Cleveland? Shaker Square, of course. University Circle, the Tower City. What is your favorite Cleveland hero? Bob Fuller?
Feller.
Feller. Yeah, baseball player. What is your
Best kept secret in
Best-
Cleveland.
what is Cleveland's best kept secret? Cleveland Museum of Natural History. What is the most memorable experience you've had with lake boating off Kelly's Island? The Cleveland Museum, many visits, new addition. Severance Hall, many concerts. What is your favorite body of water in Cleveland? Lake Erie. What is your favorite place to do it? Our deck at Moreland Courts. What other ways do you engage with it? We own a boat in Kelly's Island. We own
A boat?
a
Boot?
A house.
we own a house in Kelly's Island on the dock. What is a childhood memory about Cleveland to share? Too many to recount, all good. Feel free to add, we'll send images by email.
Okay,
Oh,
so then he,
Shaker,
then he sent pictures from the lake. Those are his photographs.
Yeah, he showed us
That is
that.
gorgeous.
Yeah, that's from the build. He said it's from his
From his
window.
balcony.
Yeah, from the balcony. Yeah.
Now,
I think
That should be in.
now another one,
that should be done in the
Yeah.
gallery. Sold. Proceeds going to Moreland Court.
Or Shaker Square.
here's one that's very different, and it's by the author of a couple of books on Cleveland, Laura Peskin's books, and she says, where to take out-of-towners. Kiss the piles of sand and what you have in the industrial flats. Look up and see the guardians of traffic looming above you. Check out the numerous local history museums. The villain is Jimmy DeMora. Her hero is Raymond Pianka, the judge, and her superhero is Superman. And the secrets are the Cleveland Lakefront Bike Trail, and the prehistoric Cleveland, earthen embankments of Greenwood Village, Sagamore Hills, and so forth. Behind the Rocky River Nature Center, the body of waters, Lake Erie, viewing lake from the natural dike number 14, engaging herself with the lake by watching migratory warblers, enjoying the volleyball net in Wendy Park, hanging out at Dyer's. That's a whole other part of Cleveland that she is describing, and I think it's fascinating.
I did
Favorite-
Shaker Square once in that.
Right,
did you?
right. And favorite street is Euclid Avenue from downtown to east of East Cleveland, 9 remaining Euclid Avenue mansions, carriage houses, all of that. Conversation, Shaker Lakes. Festival, Large Bear Porch Festival, and so forth. So I wanted you to hear those two that are so divergent that it's been great fun collecting this material. So I want to thank everybody for coming, thank you both for being here. It's been very special, and I really mean that, so.
Thank you for a nice series. Thank you.
Do you remember when you were at the Happy Dog and some of the younger people were filling that up? Like, do you remember any of what they said?
Well, they weren't, well, I did this particularly for this, but there are about, I would say there are 25 that came from then.
Because that would be interesting.
Yeah, and Michael has summarized them.
Thank you.
So here's some blanks if you want some other forms to fill out. You don't have to, but thanks so very, very much.
Yes.
I think that really went well.
Thank you, so this is just been wonderful.
It helps.
There's lots of stuff that
Oh,
is
yeah,
available for
handout.
people from the Morgan, and then there's also the Can magazine, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's quite an amazing
Goes
thing
back
being
there
published in
and then-
Cleveland. And it's free and available at a lot of places.
There's none of these are back there. Michael, where can, when will these be, can they hear these conversations?